The Mafia, specifically members and associates of the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese organized crime families, had pre-existing control over non-rigged, illegal poker games around New York City.
What you're about to hear sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood crime thriller, but this is real life, and it's happening right now, on October 23rd, 2025, in what can only be described as one of the most explosive federal operations in recent memory. The FBI unleashed a coordinated takedown across 11 states that sent shockwaves through both the NBA and the criminal underworld. Over 30 individuals were arrested in a single day, and among those arrested were names that made the entire sports world stop in its tracks. The stunning arrests that shook the NBA and organized crime world. Picture this: FBI agents descending simultaneously on homes from New York to Oregon, from Florida to Nevada, all executing arrest warrants at the crack of dawn. This wasn't just another bust. This was what FBI Director Kash Patel would later describe as something truly unprecedented, a criminal enterprise that merged the glittering world of professional basketball with the dark shadows of La Cosa Nostra. When the dust settled and the indictments were unsealed in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York, the public learned something that seemed almost impossible to believe. Chauncey Billups, the NBA Hall of Famer and current head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, was in federal custody. The man they called Mr. Big Shot, the 2004 NBA Finals MVP, who had built a legendary career on clutch performances and leadership, was now facing charges of wire fraud and money laundering conspiracy. But Billups wasn't alone. Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier was also arrested, along with former NBA player and coach Damon Jones. The charges were stunning in their scope and detail, painting a picture of an operation so sophisticated and so brazen that even seasoned law enforcement officials were calling it mind-boggling.
Good morning. Today we are here in New York to announce a historic arrest across a wide-sweeping criminal enterprise that envelops both the NBA and La Cosa Nostra. The men and women up here standing with me represent a small portion of the leadership team that brought profound justice in an era that needed it more than any. I'll just highlight some of the details in the case and the FBI work, and then you'll hear from the others. But as you now know, individuals such as Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, and Terry Rozier were taken into custody today, former, current NBA players and coaches. What you don't know is that this is an illegal gambling operation and sports rigging operation that spanned the course of years.
Let's break down exactly what happened here, because the details are absolutely staggering. The federal authorities unveiled not one, but two massive criminal schemes that had been operating for years right under everyone's noses. The first scheme involved rigged high-stakes poker games backed by 4 of New York's 5 major mafia families: the Bonanno, Gambino, Lucchese, and Genovese crime families. The second scheme was perhaps even more shocking: an insider sports betting conspiracy that exploited confidential information about NBA athletes and teams to manipulate betting outcomes. Now, let me paint you a picture of just how elaborate these operations were. The poker scheme alone had been running since at least 2019, operating in some of the most exclusive locations you can imagine. We're talking about illegal high-stakes games in the Hamptons, in Manhattan's most exclusive neighborhoods, in Las Vegas penthouses, and in Miami's luxury venues. These weren't your typical backroom card games. These were operations where wealthy businessmen, executives, and high rollers would sit down with buy-ins reaching up to $100,000 per seat, believing they were playing in legitimate, fair games. But here's where it gets truly sinister. Nothing about these games was legitimate. The Mafia-backed ring used NBA stars like Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones as what they called face cards, celebrity lures, whose presence would attract wealthy victims who were starstruck at the opportunity to play poker with NBA legends. These victims, often referred to as fish in gambling terminology, had no idea they were walking into a meticulously orchestrated trap where every card, every shuffle, every hand was rigged against them from the very beginning.
Beginning as early as 2019, the defendants in this case orchestrated a scheme to use wireless cheating technology to run rigged poker games across the United States, including in the Hamptons, Las Vegas, Miami, and Manhattan. The scheme targeted victims known as, quote, fish, who were often lured to participate in these rigged games by the chance to play alongside former professional athletes who were known as, quote, face cards. The so-called face cards included the defendant Chauncey Billups, who at the time of the scheme was a former NBA player and is currently the head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, and also Damon Jones, a former NBA player and coach. What the victims, the fish, didn't know is that everybody else at the poker game, from the dealer to the players, including the face cards, were in on the scam.
Federal prosecutors allege that Billups participated in at least one game in 2019 that defrauded victims of $50,000, with the proceeds being split among the cheaters, dealers, and organizers. But the total scope of the fraud was far more devastating. Prosecutors estimate that victims lost at least $7.15 million to this poker scheme, though the actual figure could be in the tens of millions when you account for all the games operated across multiple years and locations. And if you think the poker scheme was elaborate, wait until you hear about the sports betting conspiracy. This separate but overlapping operation ran from December 2022 through March 2024, and it involved leaking non-public information about player injuries, game availability, and strategic decisions to rig prop bets on at least 7 NBA games. We're talking about insider information that could move betting lines and generate hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent winnings. Terry Rozier's alleged role in this scheme is particularly damning. On March 23, 2023, when he was playing for the Charlotte Hornets, prosecutors claim that Rozier texted his childhood friend, De Niro Laster, to inform him that he planned to exit the game early, citing a shoulder injury. Armed with this insider knowledge, Laster and other co-conspirators placed more than $200,000 in under-prop bets on Rozier's statistics, betting that he would score fewer points, grab fewer rebounds, and dish out fewer assists than the bookmakers projected.
One example occurred on March 23, 2023, in Charlotte. Terry Rozier, an NBA player now with the Miami Heat, but at the time playing for the Hornets, allegedly let others close to him know that he planned to leave the game early with a supposed injury. Using that information, members of the group placed more than $200,000 in wagers on his under statistics. Rozier exited the game after just 9 minutes, and those bets paid out, generating tens of thousands of dollars in profit. The proceeds were later delivered to his home, where the group counted their cash. As the NBA season tips off, his career is already benched, not for injury, but for integrity.
Rozier played exactly 9 minutes and 34 seconds before leaving the court. He finished with just 9 points, and those carefully placed under bets paid out in a massive way. What makes this even more disturbing is that the NBA had actually investigated Rozier back in 2023 for this very game and cleared him at the time. But federal investigators with subpoena power and access to financial records were able to uncover evidence that the league simply couldn't access during their internal investigation. But the schemes didn't stop with just Rozier. Damon Jones, the former NBA player who became a bridge between both criminal operations, is accused of selling injury information on some of the biggest names in basketball. Prosecutors allege that Jones provided insider tips about LeBron James's unreported foot injury before a Lakers-Bucks game on February 9, 2023, and leaked information about Lakers player availability before their game against the Thunder on January 15, 2024. This information was pure gold for bettors who knew how to exploit it, allowing them to place massive wagers with inside knowledge that gave them an enormous edge over the sportsbooks and regular bettors. The high-tech Mafia operation inside the rigged poker games. Now let's dive deep into the technological sophistication of these rigged poker games, because what the FBI uncovered was nothing short of a masterclass in modern criminal innovation. The Mafia families behind these operations didn't rely on old-school cheating methods. They embraced cutting-edge technology that would make even the most high-tech casinos nervous. Let me take you inside one of these games so you can understand just how elaborate and virtually undetectable this cheating operation really was. Picture walking into what appears appears to be a legitimate high-stakes poker game. You're in an upscale Manhattan apartment or a luxury Hamptons estate. Maybe you're sitting at a table with Chauncey Billups, a genuine NBA Hall of Famer. Everything looks professional. There's a dealer, proper poker chips, what appears to be a standard automatic card, shuffling machine, and other players who seem like regular high rollers just like you. You have no reason to suspect anything is wrong, but from the moment you sit down, you're already a marked victim, and every single element of that game has been carefully designed to separate you from your money. The centerpiece of this cheating operation was the modified card shuffling machine. Federal investigators discovered that the conspirators were using off-the-shelf deckmate shuffling machines, the same type used in legitimate casinos, but these machines had been secretly modified with custom hardware and firmware. These weren't just basic hacks. We're talking about sophisticated electronic modifications that exploited known vulnerabilities in the shuffler's design. Here's how the technology worked, and I want you to really grasp how insidious this was. The modified shufflers contained hidden chips and cameras that would scan each card as it went through the shuffling process. The shuffler's internal camera, originally designed just to verify that all cards were present in the deck, was reprogrammed to actually read the face value and suit of every single card. This information, the complete order of the entire deck, was then transmitted wirelessly via Bluetooth to a nearby smartphone or tablet. But it gets even more sophisticated. The app receiving this data could predict which player would get which cards, and more importantly, which player at the table would have the best hand. However, there was one variable the system had to account for: the dealer's cut of the deck. To adjust for this, someone at the table, usually one of the conspirators, would input information about visible cards into the app once the game started. With that calibration, the system could calculate with near-perfect accuracy who would win each hand. This information was then relayed to what prosecutors called the quarterback, a person sitting at the poker table who would receive covert signals from an off-site operator. The quarterback would then use incredibly subtle signals, maybe tapping a poker chip in a certain way, touching their chin, or handling specific colored chips to communicate to the other conspirators at the table exactly how to bet. Should they go all in? Should they fold? Should they just call? Every decision was informed by perfect knowledge of who held the winning hand, but the modified shufflers were just the beginning of this technological arsenal. Federal prosecutors revealed an entire suite of cheating devices that sound like they came straight out of a James Bond movie. X-ray poker tables were among the most jaw-dropping pieces of equipment seized by federal investigators. These tables had embedded technology that could essentially see through the cards laying face down on the felt surface. During the press conference, prosecutors actually displayed images showing how these X-ray tables worked. You could clearly see the card values revealed even though the cards were face down. Imagine playing poker, not knowing that your opponents could literally see your hole cards before you even looked at them yourself. Then there were the poker chip trays with hidden cameras. These looked like ordinary chip holders, but they contained miniature cameras that could scan cards placed near them, feeding that information back into the cheating network. Marked cards visible only with special contact lenses or eyeglasses gave the cheaters yet another advantage. The cards appeared normal to everyone else, but team members wearing these special lenses could see invisible markings indicating the value and suit of each card. The operation was structured like a well-oiled criminal machine, with everyone playing their designated role. At the top were the Mafia organizers from the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese families. Ernest Aiello, identified as an acting street boss in the Bonanno family, oversaw the family's controlled games, including the operation at 147 Lexington Avenue in Manhattan. Joseph Lani, a captain in the Gambino family, controlled the Washington Place game in Greenwich Village. These Mafia figures provided protection for the games, ensured that locations were secure from law enforcement, and most importantly, they enforced the collection of debts when victims couldn't or wouldn't pay. And let me tell you about that enforcement, because this is where the operation took a truly dark turn. When victims realized they'd been cheated, or when they owed money they couldn't pay, the Mafia enforcers made sure they understood the consequences of not settling their debts.
And when people refused to pay, these defendants did what organized crime has always done. They used threats, they used intimidation, and they used violence. It's the same pattern that we have seen for decades.
federal indictments detail several instances of this violence. In October 2023, Thomas Gallardo, known by his nickname Juice, and other armed associates assaulted Amar Awade with a baton during a dispute over a competing game at the Washington Place location. Between November 2022 and February 2023, Gallardo and Zhenhu, who went by the alias Screwly, physically assaulted at least one debtor, punching him to collect gambling debts. But perhaps the most brazen act of violence was a gunpoint robbery that took place on September 7, 2023. Prosecutors allege that Amar Awade, Osman Hoti, known as Albanian Bruce, and others robbed a person at gunpoint specifically to steal one of the rigged shuffling machines. Think about that for a moment. These machines were so valuable to the criminal enterprise, so essential to their operation, that they were willing to commit armed robbery to get their hands on one. The money laundering operation was equally sophisticated. Anthony Schneiderman, known by the nickname Doc, operated multiple shell companies that existed solely to launder the proceeds from these rigged games. When victims wired money to pay their gambling debts, those funds would flow through these shell companies, get converted to cash or cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, and then be distributed among the conspirators, minus Schneiderman's laundering fee. In one instance alone, prosecutors say Schneiderman laundered at least $100,000 from a single victim. The geographic scope of these operations is truly staggering. Major games were held at the Lexington Avenue location in Manhattan's Kips Bay neighborhood and the Washington Place location in Greenwich Village. But the operation extended far beyond New York City. High-stakes rigged games took place in luxury estates in East Hampton, in penthouses in Las Vegas, and in exclusive venues in Miami. The conspirators would move the games around, following wealthy marks and setting up shop wherever they could attract high rollers with deep pockets. And here's something that really underscores the scale of this operation. In 2023, the Bonanno-controlled Lexington Avenue game and the Gambino-controlled Washington Place game actually merged their operations. This meant that proceeds were now being shared among the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese families, a level of inter-family cooperation that law enforcement officials described as extraordinarily rare. Traditionally, these mafia families are rivals, competing for territory and criminal revenue. But the poker operation was so lucrative that they put aside their differences and worked together. Now let's talk about the suppliers who made all this technology possible, because these weren't just low-level criminals. Shane Hennon, who went by the nickname Sugar, was a professional gambler based in Las Vegas who supplied rigged shuffling machines and other cheating devices to the operation. Robert Stroud, known as Black Rob, was another key supplier who provided shufflers for games in Las Vegas, East Hampton, and other locations. Tony Goodson, nicknamed Black Tony, delivered shufflers and personally participated in rigged games at the Lexington Avenue, East Hampton, and Miami locations. But the story doesn't end with the poker games, because while the rigged poker operation was devastating to its victims, the insider sports betting conspiracy threatened something even more fundamental: the integrity of the NBA itself. The fallout and what it means for the NBA's future. The implications of this scandal extend far beyond the 30-plus individuals who were arrested on October 23, 2025. We're talking about a crisis that strikes at the very heart of professional basketball and raises profound questions about the integrity of the sport that millions of fans love and billions of dollars are wagered on every single season. Let's start with the immediate NBA response, because the league moved swiftly and decisively the moment these indictments became public. Both Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier were placed on immediate, indefinite leave from their respective teams. The Portland Trail Blazers named assistant coach Tiago Splitter, who won an NBA championship with the San Antonio Spurs in 2014, as interim head coach. This wasn't just a temporary adjustment. This was the team preparing for the very real possibility that Billups might never coach in the NBA again. The Miami Heat suspended Terry Rozier indefinitely, and the timing couldn't have been worse for the franchise. Rozier was playing on a substantial contract, and suddenly, the Heat found themselves without a key guard right at the start of the season. But from the league's perspective, there was no choice. The integrity of the game had to come first, and anyone implicated in these schemes had to be immediately removed from active participation until the legal process played out. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver issued a statement emphasizing that the integrity of our game is paramount and pledged the league's full cooperation on with federal investigators. But this wasn't the first time Silver had to deal with a gambling scandal. In April 2024, Toronto Raptors player Jonte Porter was banned for life after being caught in a similar prop betting scheme. Porter had shared insider information about his own playing status, allowing co-conspirators to place massive bets on under props for his statistics. He would then exit games early, ensuring those bets paid off. What's particularly troubling is that Jonte Porter's case is directly connected to this larger investigation. Shane Hennon and Eric Ernest, two of the defendants in the current case, were linked to Porter's scheme as well. This suggests that what we're looking at isn't a series of isolated incidents, but rather a coordinated criminal network that had tentacles reaching throughout professional basketball. FBI Director Kash Patel's characterization of this as the insider trading saga for the NBA is particularly apt, because that's exactly what this is. In the financial world, insider trading, using non-public information to gain an advantage in the markets, is one of the most serious white-collar crimes you can commit. What Rozier, Jones, and the others are accused of doing is the sports equivalent, using non-public information about injuries, player availability, and team strategy to manipulate betting outcomes. But here's what makes this especially insidious. The rise of legalized sports betting has created an environment where these kinds of schemes are both more profitable and potentially more prevalent than ever before. Following the Supreme Court's 2018 decision to overturn the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, PASPA, sports betting has exploded across the United States. Americans now wager over $150 billion annually on sports, with the NBA representing a massive chunk of that action. The proliferation of online sports books and mobile betting apps has made it easier than ever to place wagers, and the introduction of prop bets, wagers on specific player performances rather than just game outcomes, has created a whole new landscape of betting opportunities. But it's also created a whole new landscape of vulnerabilities. When you can bet on whether a specific player will score more or less than 15.5 points, and that player knows in advance that they're planning to exit the game early with a fake injury, that creates an opportunity for massive fraud. Let's talk about what the legal consequences could be for the defendants, because the charges they're facing are extraordinarily serious. Wire fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Conspiracy each carry maximum sentences of 20 years in federal prison. When you stack multiple charges together, you're looking at potential sentences that could effectively be life imprisonment for some of the older defendants. For Terry Rozier specifically, the consequences could be devastating. He signed a contract with the Miami Heat worth $96.3 million over 4 years, with $26.6 million remaining on that deal. If he's convicted, or if the NBA decides to ban him from the league, as they have the right to do under the league's constitution for betting-related violations, that entire contract could be voided. The Heat could potentially recoup that money, and Rozier would lose tens of millions of dollars on top of facing decades in federal prison. Chauncey Billups faces similar financial devastation. He's a Hall of Famer with a legacy as one of the game's great clutch performers. But if he's convicted of these charges, that legacy will be forever tarnished. The Trailblazers could terminate his coaching contract, and he would almost certainly never work in professional basketball again. His attorney has issued a strong denial of the charges, with the statement emphasizing that Billups categorically denies these allegations and plans to fight them vigorously in court, but the damage to his reputation has already been done. Now let's talk about the broader context of gambling scandals in NBA history, because this isn't the first time the league has faced these issues. The 2007 Tim Donaghy referee betting scandal remains one of the darkest moments in NBA history. Donaghy, an NBA referee, pleaded guilty to charges of betting on games he officiated, using insider knowledge to influence his calls and maximize his profits. He served 15 months in federal prison, and the scandal led to sweeping reforms in how the league monitors its officials. But this current scandal is arguably even more serious than Donaghy's, because it involves multiple active players and coaches over an extended period of time, affecting numerous games and potentially influencing playoff races and season outcomes. The indictments detail at least 7 NBA games that were directly affected by the insider betting conspiracy, but investigators believe there could be many more games involved that they haven't yet uncovered. And here's something that should terrify NBA fans. This investigation is ongoing. That means federal investigators believe there are more people involved who haven't yet been charged. When asked during the press conference whether more arrests were coming, U.S. Attorney Joseph Notzella said said he couldn't comment on ongoing investigations, which strongly suggests that additional indictments are likely. FBI Assistant Director Christopher Ria's comment that this is only the tip of the iceberg should send chills down the spine of anyone who cares about the integrity of professional basketball. How many other players might be involved? How many other games might have been compromised? How deep does this corruption really run? Now let's address the elephant in the room. Did the NBA's embrace of legalized sports, betting, and partnerships with gambling companies create an environment where these scandals were inevitable? The league has multi-billion-dollar partnerships with companies like FanDuel and DraftKings. NBA broadcasts are filled with betting odds and prop bet suggestions. The league has thoroughly integrated gambling into its product in ways that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. Critics argue that by normalizing gambling and making it such a central part of the fan experience, the league created an environment where players and coaches became desensitized to the ethical lines they shouldn't cross. Sports columnists have written scathing pieces arguing that the NBA invited gambling controversy by embracing betting culture so completely. On the other hand, defenders of the league point out that sports betting was always going to be legalized, and by partnering with legitimate, regulated sports books, the NBA actually created a system where suspicious betting patterns can be more easily detected. DraftKings and other sports books were actually the ones who first flagged the suspicious betting activity around Jonte Porter's games, which ultimately led to his ban and criminal charges. Without the cooperation of legal sports books, those irregularities might never have been noticed. The Mafia's involvement in this case adds yet another layer of concern. Law enforcement officials have been clear that La Cosa Nostra, while diminished from its peak in previous decades, is very much still active and adapting to modern criminal opportunities. The cooperation of 4 major crime families on a single operation shows both the lucrativeness of gambling-related crimes and the willingness of these organizations to work together when profits are high enough. For the defendants now facing trial, the road ahead is going to be brutal. Federal prosecutors have a conviction rate of over 90%, and in this case, they have physical evidence of the rigged equipment, financial records showing the money flows, text messages and communications between conspirators, and cooperating witnesses who have already agreed to testify. Some of the defendants charged in related cases have already pleaded guilty and are cooperating with investigators, which means they'll be testifying against the others in exchange for reduced sentences. Several defendants have already been denied bail due to concerns about witness tampering and obstruction of justice. Angelo Ruggiero Jr., a Gambino family member and the son of a notorious Gotti associate, was specifically denied bail because prosecutors argued he had access to the resources and connections to intimidate witnesses or flee. The judge agreed, finding that Ruggiero posed too great a risk to the integrity of the prosecution. The question now is whether the NBA can learn from this scandal, implement meaningful reforms, and restore public confidence in the integrity of the game. The alternative, a future where fans constantly question whether what they're watching is legitimate competition or manipulated entertainment, is simply too bleak to contemplate. As FBI Director Kash Patel said, this is the NBA's insider trading saga, and how the league responds will determine whether basketball emerges from this crisis stronger and more vigilant, or whether this is just the first chapter in an ongoing story of corruption and betrayal. That brings us to the end of this video. For more interesting videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.